Good evening everyone and welcome to an Oz Cyclone Chasers Cyclone video update tonight, the 4th of April 2014. Tonight is the 25th anniversary of the crossing of Tropical Cyclone Aivu, a very severe Category 3, possibly even underrepresented Category 3 tropical cyclone that struck the Burdekin coastline this time in 1989 and caused $90 million worth of damages, which is equivalent to about $170 million in today's calculations. And on top of that, unfortunately took the life of one Burdekin resident. Now, we will go through a couple of photos that have been submitted with some of the damage from that system. Some very emotional pictures submitted here by a resident from the Burdekin, Megan Law, who is on our Facebook page. This is of her house in Inkerman, as it was demolished by Cyclone Aivu 25 years ago. And Megan tells us a very, very scary story about her experience and her family's experience 25 years ago, when they didn't have up-to-the-minute radar and they didn't have automatic weather stations, they didn't have Facebook, they didn't have any of that stuff, they didn't have mobile phones. Things were a lot scarier back then. You were a lot more alone back then when a severe cyclone would hit you. You can see the cane fields here completely flattened. This is all that was left of the lounge and the laundry. There used to be a big shed over here. It was completely demolished, nothing left of it. Another follower of ours, William Walker, has told us many stories of his experience, his family's experience, and experiences that he's heard about in the Burdekin region. This was the Air train station, completely demolished, so no trains were able to get in or out of the Burdekin of Queensland for an extended period of time. All that was left of a house demolished in air. So, severe Cyclone Aivu, this is what happened. It hit the Burdekin coastline 10 a.m. on the 4th of April 1989 as a Category 3, but it was a very high-end Category 3. A lot of folks in the area believe that the Bureau may have slightly underestimated the winds in this particular thing, particularly due to the damage assessment conducted post the cyclone impact. But overall, it became a Category 4 there for a period, and luckily it weakened a little as it approached the Queensland coastline. And I guess one of the good things about it is from then on, the Bureau of Meteorology started to issue categories with their tropical cyclone advices, so people had a better idea and a better understanding of what to expect from tropical cyclones that impacted the region. So up until that 1989 season, the Bureau would keep categories internal, so they would know what category it was, but they wouldn't relay that information to the public. And so once this season was done, one of the major assessment or major overhauls in the Bureau's warning was that they would now include categories in their tropical cyclone advices. So, you know, from such a disaster, we do see improvements and enhancements. One of the other key things with this particular cyclone was it was one of the first cyclones ever tracked in Australia using hourly satellite imagery. Before then, the Bureau only really had access to images from satellite every couple of hours, every 3 hours, and occasionally there would be an extra pass there somewhere in between the 3 hours, but overall every 3 hours was the earliest they could track this. So this was one of the first cyclones that they could track in hourly throughout its history, throughout its life cycle, until it came into radar coverage. The other thing after this cyclone was that we started to there was a big push on getting a radar out here in Willis Island, and another push to get more radars along the east coast, so they're able to track and trace these systems as they approach the Queensland coast. So there were major advancements following this particular cyclone. So in a way, I know we've covered this ad nauseum today, but it is a cyclone, a landmark cyclone for Queensland, because it did usher in some major enhancements to the warning process, and it also ushered in or caused a little bit of a hurry up in the development of better warning resources and better meteorological resources in the area. So we thank those people on social media who have shared their stories over the last few days, flashing back to this system. And I guess it's kind of fitting now that we're talking about a new Coral Sea tropical cyclone developing out there near the Solomon Islands. And here is that system we're talking about. Thanks to Weather Zone for the hourly satellite imagery, we can see here the system spinning away quite nicely out here in the northeastern Coral Sea. Unfortunately, thanks to ABC for these images, abc.net.au, we see some flash flooding over the Solomon Islands has now killed 16 people, and you can see using this slideshow that there's been some torrential rain, some of the heaviest in known living history of the people there. Some of this rainfall has just been insanely heavy, and unfortunately has now killed 16 people. And look, there may be a fair bit more rain to come, with the cyclone not showing, or sorry, the tropical low not showing really any signs of wanting to move anywhere over the next 24 hours. So if we had a look at a still image of the system, we've seen the center is quite difficult to locate on some satellites because of the amount of cloud in the region. And at the moment, the Joint Typhoon Warning Center's best guess estimate is a little bit further to the west of the Bureau of Meteorology's best guess estimate, but not by far. The Bureau's got the center just over in underneath this cloud, the thickest cloud. The JTWC has the circulation to the west of the center of that cloud mass. Really, it's an immaterial at the moment because of the amount of cloud around it, creating some massive rainfall here along the Solomon Islands region. And if we look at the wind shear in the region, we can see that over the system itself, it's around about 10 to 15 knots of wind shear. But as it's also underneath an upper level anticyclone, which is located right over the top of the circulation center, or where we estimate the circulation center would be. And so, look, folks, it's in some pretty good conditions, and unless something unexpected happens, we should be seeing Tropical Cyclone Aivu being named over the next couple of days, possibly even as early as late tomorrow. So don't be surprised if Aivu starts gracing your weather maps shortly. And once again, when we look at this satellite imagery, it's very difficult to pinpoint an exact center, but it appears as though the center is probably located out here just to the west of all that really thick cloud, which is over the top of the Solomons. And if we take a look at the developing cyclone here, we can see that it's really packing a punch on its southwestern quadrant. Now, most cyclones in the southern hemisphere in the Australian region do pack their strongest winds from about there all the way through to about there. And we're seeing this one a very typically asymmetric tropical low, so it's packing some big winds to the southwest and the south, but not much happening up to its north, and that's quite common for cyclones in the Australian region. The winds are still not strong enough for it to be labelled a tropical cyclone. The winds are about 20 to 30 knots in this southwestern quadrant, so we need to see those winds increase by about another 5 knots, and we need to see them start to wrap around the centre, particularly more than halfway around. So at the moment we're probably just under halfway around the system. We really need to see those winds wrapping more than halfway around the centre of that system and intensifying by about another 5 to 10 knots before we see it labelled and named a tropical cyclone. So I guess that's talking about its current structure. I guess most people will want to know now, where is it going? Is it going to do a Cyclone Aivu? Is it going to come straight out here to southwest and whack into the Queensland coast as a strong system? Well, at this stage, we can not too much confidence, but we can say with mild confidence that it probably won't do that. What we can see, though, is an increasing number. Now, back in our update on Tuesday, we said the system was expected to basically track west, 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 and then bang, straight down here. Now, what we're suggesting now is that that's not as clear cut. So what we're seeing is a little bit of variability now starting to creep into the model guidance, whereby some models do not have this system pushing all the way west, and I mean all the way west, and they do somehow either stall it off the Queensland coast, they either hit the far northern parts of Queensland with it, or sometimes some of the models suggesting that it hits here and then pushes down here into the top end. So really there is a little bit more variability now compared to what there was 3 days ago, which is quite interesting because normally as we get closer and the system develops a bit more, we tend to see more agreement, whereas at the moment we're starting to see more disagreement between the model guidance. So overall though, this is still the expected track, so we're still expecting the system from here to track in a west-southwest, then west or west-northwest direction, cross the top of the Cape, and push across the top of the top end or just into the Arafura Sea. And in the long term we're expecting a bit of a curve and then possibly an impact here along the Pilbara or Kimberley in the extreme long term. So folks, that is the expected, still the favoured track according to the guidance, but there is a lot more variability now than there was on the 1st of April when I first posted our forecast or our outlook on this, where we said that it was very likely to do this. Now it's still likely to do this, but there is that element of doubt creeping into the guidance. So the track forecast I'm showing you here is from the GFS model, the Global Forecasting System model, and we basically see the system now tracking in a very slow west-southwest motion and then stalling out here in the north-central Coral Sea over the next 5 days. And here's the GFS track forecast in a little bit more detail. We can see that it stalls and it does intensify into a Category 1, possibly even a Category 2 tropical cyclone as it pushes very, very slowly to the west over the 6-day period. So the first chart was 5 days, this is day 6. We see a recommencement of that slight westerly shift. As we head to day 7, we can see that the system continues to just push west very slowly and stalls just off the North Tropical Coast on day 8. If we take a look at the track forecast from the Bureau of Meteorology's Access G model, thanks to Weather Zone for the weather graphics of this model, 24 hours time we see no significant development of the system by 10 AM tomorrow. 48 hours time it's near the southeastern tip of P. At day 3 we see some development of the tropical low, possibly into a tropical cyclone by day 3, that's the Monday. And then it weakens a little as it interacts with the southern tip of PNG. And that weakening trend continues as we head to Wednesday. And then once it's in the Gulf of Papua, we see the system re-intensifying and then making landfall around the Lockhart River area. The Canadian CMC model suggests a coastal crossing a little bit south of Lockhart, suggests a coastal crossing around Princess Charlotte Bay or Cape Melville, near or just to the north of Cooktown. That's a very interesting scenario for us from a chase perspective because Cooktown is certainly a chaseable location. The extremely high resolution FIM9 model has a very interesting scenario as well, where the system continues over the 5-day period to drift in a west-southwesterly direction, to be lying basically east of Lockhart at day 5. Now from there is varying guidance as to whether it remains off the coast and pushes southeast like the GFS model does, or whether it pushes or continues to push in a west to west-southwest direction. So really folks, at this stage anyone to the north of Cairns needs to be aware that this system could pose a threat. While, as I said, the favoured area for it to cross the coast, I should say, it's been a long week, is Cooktown northwards, but even a slight deviation in the track, or perhaps that stall happens a little earlier, or perhaps we don't get that west to west northwest motion, areas Cairns northwards do need to be aware of the threat posed by this system. At this stage, none of the guidance suggesting it'll be pushing south of Cairns and actually hitting the coast. There is guidance, there is an increasing but still insignificant amount of guidance suggesting a coastal track, a track a little bit further to the south and then pushing back out here to the southeast. As I said, that is still an insignificant minority of global computer models forecast, but it is an increasing minority. So that's why, as I said to you, while our favoured track is this one here, there is now more doubt in that track than there was 4 days ago. And I guess one of the models that has been steadfast in predicting this to keep pushing west across the continent has been the UK Met model. Now, the UK Met model has been absolutely stubborn in its prediction that this system will push this way, then this way, then this way, and then this way. All right, it has been absolutely stubborn in it. However, in today's run of this model, we see that this push to the west stalls out here, and we see the system doing nothing there for a period, and this could be a period of uncertainty as to whether it then continues west or stalls off the coast and pushes in a more south to southeast direction in the longer term. And I think this model is now starting to throw a little bit of a spanner in the works, because up until now it has been absolutely 100% stubborn on this track, this initial track to the west, and then eventual impact on the Pilbara coast. And you can clearly see in a high resolution look at the UK Met model what I'm talking about. See, in the past, every time we've been looking at this model, and this model is something to note because it is one of the most accurate in the world, it has been showing this system just pushing directly out here to the west and crossing the Northern Cape. In today's model run, we see a complete change in forecast philosophy in this model, where the ridging that is expected to develop over northern Queensland does not happen, and so the system stalls out here to the east of Cape Melville for an extended period of time, and possibly eventually pushes in a south or southeast direction out here. So folks, while I said that Cairns northwards needs to be aware of this system, with this increasing element of doubt, I think all people on the Queensland coast north of Mackay probably just need to be aware that the system is there, and not eat your cyclone food just yet. So if we take a look at the ensemble from the GFS, we can see that over the next couple of days it's expected to move to the west-southwest, stall, and then push in an easterly direction according to the GFS model. The CMC model has coastal crossings on the Queensland coast from most of its ensemble, and it has basically the lowest or the furthest south crossing is around Cairns. The furthest north is just south of Bamaga, with the area around that Cape Melville being the hot tip at the moment. And the UK Met model has a couple of members stalling the system and then completely dying it out here in the central or northern Coral Sea. But the models that do hit the coast do so north of Cape Melville, so Lockhart River, Bamaga, all that region needs to be aware that the system could be, or is most likely to be, posing a threat to them initially, and then the northeastern parts of the Northern Territory in the medium to longer term. So once again, folks, can I stress that the favoured forecast for this system is the one shown here, where it pushes west and then continues pushing west, and then eventually ends up hitting the Pilbara or Kimberley coastline. So that is still the favoured long-term situation. What we are throwing though is what we are telling you though is that the models are throwing in a spanner in the works, with some suggesting no coastal crossing at all, and the ones that are suggesting no coastal crossing have a slightly different trajectory. So on the European model by day 5, we have quite a large error margin here of where the system could be located. More than likely going to remain in the northern Coral Sea, but whether it stalls out here east of PNG or whether it continues pushing west to the west of PNG really is up in the air at the moment. So if we look at why the hell all this disagreement is starting to creep into the models, well, what we can see in the middle levels of the atmosphere is this little blighter here, which is an upper level low and associated upper level trough, pushing into the northwest or amplifying to the northwest and into the Coral Sea. Now this will try to pull the system down into it. So it's going to try and pull the Coral Sea system down towards it. However, what we have developing in the northern Queensland region is this big upper high, and this upper high is going to try and pull the system this way, away from that upper trough, and it's going to have two competing steering influences. Now, up until today, most of the guidances were suggesting that, or in fact, almost unanimously were suggesting that this high will be too strong, this trough will not be able to capture the system. Today, we see just a little bit of variability in that, where this high doesn't develop in time, this upper trough develops a little bit more than forecast initially, and is able to pull the system, or at least stall the system, from being captured by the upper ridge and pushing in a west to west northwest direction. As we all know, folks, the Coral Sea is always full of surprises. So, by next Friday, we expect the system to be located anywhere in the region from about Cape Melville to the Torres Strait, and all the way west to about Gove, and all the way east to about the eastern tip of PNG. And if that wasn't enough variability for you, the system could still be stalled out here in the northern Coral Sea and not pushing anywhere near Queensland. So we've got that many alternative options there by day 7, that the initial talk that we had on the 1st of April, where everything was so clear cut, and we always know, as Oz Cyclone chasers, we always know the Coral Sea is never, ever is it that easy to predict. And so there's always a spanner in the works, and tonight the spanner in the works is in the form of that upper level trough or upper level low near New Zealand, pushing the upper level trough north into the Coral Sea. So when we look at the upper levels, even into next Friday, we have this ridge over the central part of Australia. It's going to keep trying to push. If the system's in the Gulf, it's going to keep trying to push it in a westerly direction. But if the system is still located in the Coral Sea, we still have this upper trough trying to push northwards into the Coral Sea and pull or suck this system down to the south or southeast with it. So, folks, there are competing steering influences. It was never going to be as easy as we thought it was going to be on the 1st of April. So it's not a clear cut anymore track of, say, a Monica, where it just continues pushing west, 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 and then bang, hits the coast. It's no longer that easy to predict. So, folks, that's enough on that, because we'll continue to update you on this. The next update will probably be on a Sunday night. Now we'll go back to 2 every 2 nights, and then once it starts to show signs of hitting the Queensland coast as a cyclone, we'll drop down to nightly updates and possibly look at chasing this particular system. Alright, on Saturday we see some isolated showers on the Queensland coast, anywhere from around about just north of St. Lawrence, all the way through to the tip of the Cape, obviously with enhanced activity around the Cairns to Ingham region. We can see that the Coral Sea stuff is happening and starting to push to the west. We've also got a decent trough here of shower and storm activity pushing through Western Australia, possibly even the western top end there, copying some isolated storm activity. On Sunday, we see that trough enhanced, or the rain associated with that trough enhanced across eastern WA, and we see the activity over the tropics in the Kimberley region with some showers and storms. We also see an increase in shower activity on the northeastern and the Arnhem coastline, and also along the northern peninsula, or far northern peninsula, and the Torres Strait. We see a decrease in shower activity along the Queensland coast, possibly some showers and storms over the southeastern parts of Queensland on Sunday. On Monday, we see a big increase in showers around the Cairns to Ingham coastline, with some isolated stuff further south towards Bowen. And we see this Coral Sea activity really starting to be enhanced and pushing westwards. But see how it's pushing westwards very slowly. So even the models that have this hitting the Queensland coast do not do so until around about Tuesday at the earliest next week. So, folks, there's still a fair bit of time to go before the system makes any sort of landfall on Queensland, if in fact it does. And we still have this trough system over the inland parts of WA here, and pushing into South Australia and southwestern NT. So even Alice Springs could be in with an outside chance of a thunderstorm on Monday. And the top end, the western top end, still continuing to see isolated showers and storms. So is the Kimberley. As we head to Tuesday, then, we start to see some guidance pushing the cyclone in the Coral Sea onto the Queensland coast. Once again, at the current trajectory, or the current area of impact suggested by the model guidance, if it hits Queensland, is this area here that I've highlighted. So really, and out of that area, if we put it, we're going to see that it's actually this particular region of Queensland here that's most favoured to cop it. But it's, I guess, anywhere in that yellow needs to be alert of this system being in the area by Tuesday. So here's all the rainfall associated with it. Because the southeast stream is enhanced, we should see an enhancement of shower activity even south of Cairns, despite the fact that the system may cross way up here north of Cooktown. We should still see an increase in shower activity regardless, anywhere sort of north of about Ingham. And over this inland trough is really starting to strengthen now. And I guess the big thing with this, folks, is if the inland trough pushes towards the east and the Coral Sea system remains out here in the Coral Sea, the inland trough or the upper level trough associated with this is likely to A, increase wind shear, and B, possibly move the system in a southeast direction if it's still located offshore as this trough moves eastwards. So there's a lot of variables in the medium to longer term. Once again, can I stress, nothing has changed in terms of the most favoured forecast of the system, which is to push this way and then this way and then down. Alright, so that's still the most favoured forecast for the system. However, there are spanners being thrown everywhere now. The other big thing to note is the next 4 days after that, that inland trough over South Australia, Northern Territory, doesn't move east very quickly according to most of the guidance, so it's likely to dump some fairly significant falls of rain along southern Australia, even into Victoria and western New South Wales. This Coral Sea cyclone is expected to push once again. Remember, the most favoured is expected to now push into the Gulf and start to enhance rainfall on the northeastern Arnhem coastline and also in the West Peninsula and East Peninsula as well. So, folks, really, it's all in terms of the Queensland rainfall and the northeast NT rainfall. It's all dependent on the movement and position of what will be Tropical Cyclone Aivu, and this inland trough here should dump some very, very welcome late wet season rainfall. Alright, folks, thanks very much for watching. I know tonight's been a long one. There's a few things we needed to talk about. Hopefully on Sunday night we can zero in right into what could become Cyclone Aivu by Sunday night. Our next update, Sunday night. Have a great weekend. If you're out watching the footy, playing footy, doing any sort of sport, we hope it's a great weekend for sport for you. Have a great weekend. We'll talk on Sunday night. Good night.